Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to build a conceptual mind map of a topic that affects absolutely every single one of us, literally every single day, and that is our finances. Now, usually when we talk about money, right, there's this immediate sense of dread. We picture opening some massive, totally overwhelming spreadsheet and looking at complicated math. But relax, we aren't going to look at a single spreadsheet today. Instead, we're going to map out the fascinating, kind of messy psychology behind our money.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We're basing our visual map today on Morgan Housel's brilliant book, The Psychology of Money. And the central thesis we need to establish right off the bat is a real game changer. It's the idea that doing well with money actually has very little to do with how smart you are, and a whole lot to do with how you behave. Financial success isn't a hard science, it's a soft skill. And the best part? It's a skill that literally anyone can master once you understand the human element behind it.
And honestly, this story hits the nail on the head. Let's look at this absolutely wild contrast. On the left, we've got a tech executive. This guy was a certified genius, patented key Wi-Fi components in his 20s. But he had this terribly insecure, childish relationship with his wealth. I mean, he literally skipped solid gold coins into the Pacific Ocean like they were skipping stones, just for fun. No way, right? Unsurprisingly, he went completely broke. But then on the right, you have Ronald Reed. He was a janitor, a gas station attendant. For decades, he just swept floors, fixed cars, lived a super modest, quiet life. Yet when he died, he left behind an estate worth millions, generated simply through quiet, consistent saving and compounding. So this completely shatters the whole illusion that building wealth requires extreme intelligence or some high-powered career.
So what does this all mean? Well, it means we've kind of been approaching personal finance all wrong. We mistakenly treat money like a physics problem. We think it's governed by rigid rules, exact formulas, unbreakable laws. But trying to manage money like some perfectly emotionless robot? Sure, that might work in a simulation. But in reality, money operates way more like psychology. It's driven entirely by human emotions, nuance, and behavioral soft skills. Knowing what to do on paper tells you absolutely nothing about what actually happens in your head and in your gut when you try to execute it in the real world.
So to make sense of all this, here is the central hub of our mind map today. We've got 4 key nodes. 1. Perspectives, why no one's crazy. 2. The uncontrollables, luck and risk. 3. Human nature, reasonable over rational. And 4. The ultimate goal, time and ego.
Let's start building out that first node, perspectives, and the deeply counterintuitive idea that when it comes to money, no one is actually crazy.
Take a look at this ridiculously tiny number. Your personal experience with money makes up maybe 0.000000001% of what has actually happened in the history of the world. But here's the kicker. That tiny, microscopic sliver of experience makes up about 80% of how you personally think the world works. Which brings us to a really direct question for you. Why do we make crazy money choices? To bridge the gap between abstract behavioral economics and your own wallet, the answer is simply that we're all making decisions based on our own incredibly limited, unique sets of experiences. Experiences that just, well, make sense to us at a given moment.
Just think about how insanely diverse our backgrounds are. People from different generations, raised by different parents who earn different incomes, born into completely different economies, experiencing radically different job markets. They all learn wildly different lessons about how money works. I mean, a child of the Great Depression views a dollar fundamentally differently than some tech worker who made a fortune in the late 90s .com boom. Your reality is fundamentally different from mine. So what looks like a totally crazy financial choice to you might seem perfectly logical to someone else, just based on the specific lens they're viewing the world through.
And hey, if you ever feel like you're behind or just totally confused by finance, don't sweat it. Look at this. The labor force participation rate for men over 65 has been plummeting since the 1880s. What that tells us is that the very concept of modern retirement is practically an infant. Saving and investing for a multi-decade retirement, that's a completely brand new game in human history. Prior to World War II, most people literally just worked until they died. We are all quite literally still figuring out how to play this game.
To wrap up this first node, I absolutely love this observation from Voltaire. History never repeats itself. Man always does. If you want to understand why people bury themselves in debt or panic sell during a market crash, don't go studying historical interest rates. Study the history of human greed, insecurity, and optimism. It's our deeply ingrained human behavior that consistently drives these massive financial cycles.
All right, branching off from there, we have to talk about external forces in the second node of our map, the uncontrollables.
The source text beautifully describes luck and risk as siblings. They represent this incredibly humbling reality that every single outcome in life is guided by forces other than just our own individual effort. And man, it takes a profound amount of humility to accept that, doesn't it? When you properly factor in these uncontrollable siblings, you realize that nothing is quite as good or quite as bad as it initially seems. Sometimes you make a brilliant choice and just get smacked by a bad risk. Other times you make a totally foolish choice and get saved by pure dumb luck.
And knowing that helps us avoid a seriously dangerous ego-driven trap. There is no reason to risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. I'll say it right now, the absolute hardest financial skill to master is getting the goalpost of our desires to just stop moving. If you already have enough to cover what you need and a lot of what you want, please don't let the illusion of more push you into unnecessary risks that could wipe you out entirely.
Moving right along, let's explore the third branch of our map, human nature, and why being reasonable is actually a way better strategy than being strictly rational.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just how validating it is. You are not a spreadsheet. You are a beautifully screwed up, totally emotional human being, just like the rest of us. When it comes to managing your money, aiming to be mostly reasonable actually works far better in the real world than trying to be coldly, perfectly rational. Why? Because if we try to be perfectly rational, we crash headfirst into some severe psychological hurdles. First up, we drastically underestimate how much we're going to change in the future. Psychologists actually call this the end of history illusion. It's this false belief that the person we are right now, today, is exactly who we will always be. Actually, scratch that. It's more like we think our personal evolution has finished. But because we change, sticking to some rigid 30-year financial plan is nearly impossible. Second, we tend to easily rationalize our greedy decisions in hindsight, kind of tricking ourselves into thinking we knew what we were doing the whole time. And third, unlike an isolated personal health issue, financial risks are deeply systemic. They ripple through the whole society and capture our collective attention in ways that induce mass panic. In fact, our tendency to panic, it's purely evolutionary. As psychologist Daniel Kahneman points out, organisms that treat threats as more urgent than opportunities simply have a better chance to survive and reproduce. Because of this evolutionary asymmetry, we all have a natural, intense aversion to loss. And this makes pessimism dangerously seductive when dealing with money. We are literally hardwired to freak out, which is exactly why a perfectly rational financial plan usually falls apart the second the stock market drops. You don't need a perfect plan, you need a reasonable plan that explicitly accounts for your own emotional freakouts.
Finally, let's look at the ultimate hub of our map, the ultimate goal. This is where we completely redefine what true wealth actually looks like.
So, the absolute most crucial point to take away from all of this is right here. Controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays, period. The ability to wake up every single day and do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want. That is priceless. That is the true ultimate purpose of building wealth. It's not about the luxury goods, it's about waking up with total agency over your own life.
And the formula to get there? It's amazingly simple, though admittedly psychologically tough to execute. Step 1. Spend less. Now you can spend less if you, step 2, desire less. And you will fundamentally desire less if you, step 3, care less about what other people think of you. Building savings is entirely in your control once you finally detach your ego from your spending habits.
Let's see how this all builds together. Less ego directly equals more wealth. Because wealth is actually what you don't see. It's the luxury car you didn't buy, the expensive watch you passed on, the first-class upgrade you declined. It is actively suppressing today's desires in order to have tomorrow's freedom. We often buy the incredibly expensive sports car because we want people to respect and admire us, right? But we ironically forget that people respect kindness and humility far, far more than they respect horsepower and chrome. If you want respect, be kind. If you want wealth, hide your ego.
Which brings us to the end of our mind map. And a final provocative thought I want to leave you with today to challenge your own relationship with money. Take a really hard look at your own spending and ask yourself this. Are you using your money to buy ego, or are you using it to buy freedom? Keep that question in mind as you make your financial choices moving forward. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep building your map.